It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
You know, I've talked about that economics teacher I had in high school that shared with me that if I just saved $100 a month, you know, I would be a millionaire by the time I was 65. And that broke that concept that not coming from money that I can have $1 million. So I did this, and this is what's cool with knowing that I was going to do the show for 3 weeks. I pulled my daughter aside and said, hey, I'm doing show prep. I want to talk to you. What do you think it would take to be a millionaire? I could see her, you know, her wheels starting to turn.
And she's good at math.
She's math-minded. She's great at math. My daughter, she is just like me in the fact that I think her brain works in a very mathematical way. She's beautiful. She's brilliant. My problem, and I'm glad she gets to hear this, is that I want her to attack life more. I think you have all these talents, that there's this mentality that you should use talents and try to, you know, see how much you can stretch and accomplish. And I'm trying to instill that in her as well. But here's getting back on with, I said, what do you think it takes to make $1 million? And I could see her brain turning, and I brought it down into even more digestible terms. I said, okay, think about this. You're now at the age where you're babysitting son. I said, you know, so we babysit probably 2 weekends a month. You know, you're making, and I said, so you're pulling in, you know, $60, $100, something in there. I said, how much of that would you think you'd be willing to put aside if you could have $1 million? And she gave an answer, and it was, you know, $30, $40 or something like that. And I said, okay. I said that, but the actual answer is $52, meaning that if you start at 14 years of age and you saved $52 a month, earning 10%, which historically is pretty reasonable, by the time you're 65, you would have $1 million. And I could see the light bulb go off in her head where she was like, wow, I could do $52. It was kind of the same thing I had. So I decided I wanted to do something because I wanted to do something different because I've had podcast listeners tell me they're doing this, and I wanted to implement, and I wanted to share it with you guys so you could hear how this actually manifested also when I was talking to my daughter about it. I said, well, here's the thing, honey, how about if you knew daddy and mommy and daddy were actually going to help you fund that goal? I want to create, just like your employer, when you go and start your first job, your employer is going to provide a match. They're going to say, hey, if you give 3% or 4% of your wages towards your retirement plan, we're going to give you 100% match on that money, or 50% match, because we want to encourage you to do this good habit of saving for the future. Right. But I don't want to wait. Here's the thing, and this is why podcast listeners have shared this with me. I don't want to wait until my daughter's 22 years of age before I have to see, is she going to make the right decision on deferring gratification and saving for a future? It's kind of like, I missed the marshmallow test. You know, if you go and Google that, I think around 2 years of age, I missed that one. So I don't want to take any chances. Truthfully, I'm doing that off memory. Okay. You might want to, you're the one with the computer. Make sure we don't give bad information.
Well, my daughter would crush those marshmallows, my 2-year-old.
So maybe it's not 2 years old, but maybe it was 5 years old. But you might want to check that out to clarify. But I just wanted to find out, I said, what if we're going to do just like your employer? What if I gave you 100% matching up to whatever you put in up to $100? What would you be willing to put in? I've already shared with you $52 is the baseline to make $1 million by the time you're 65.
Right.
I was so proud of her because she said, I don't want to do $50. Dad, I think I could do $35 a month. So then we would be putting $70 a month.
Let me tell you what I get excited about. She could have done the easy math and said, okay, well, half of 50 is 25. I'll do 25 and that'll get me. But she actually went even a little above and beyond.
Well, and here's the thing, because you guys are you're listening and you're thinking, well, I need to give some guidance to my kids and tell them as a percentage or how to think about saving in general. And you know, from listening to the podcast, our number is 15 to 20% of your income and your wages. Now, the good news about a 14-year-old is they don't have a lot of things pulling at the purse strings.
Not
so
a ton
that
of
15 to 20%. So I was excited to see that because she probably does pull in $60 to $100, because, and you'll hear in a minute, I get a discounted rate. I get what's called a food and shelter discount. So she makes a little bit less when she's babysitting for me and my wife. But then she does babysit some of the neighbor kids, and she gets full market rate, full bear on that. So I was trying to explain to her that I think it's awesome that she's willing to save somewhere between, if she's making $60 a month, that's well over 50%. Mm-hmm. If she's making $100, then, you know, that she's thinking about 35% of her money for the future. Great. That's very healthy, and that's a great thing. Here's the other cool thing I liked. I did the math for her. I said, you know what? That's great that you're not doing the minimum, which was the $52. Mm-hmm. You're going 70. That turns into $1,341,000.
Wow.
She added another $300,000 just by changing that thing of behavior. And here's the other thing I tried to share with her is that is the equivalent of 6 hours. If you think about what you have to do to put that money in, that $35 is 6 hours of watching her sister, or it's 3 hours of watching a neighbor's kids or something
Sounds like you pay
that.
half as much.
Well, like I said, there's a food and shelter discount.
Do those bleed over to any
Do you pay for any food and shelter?
Buy her dinner.
I'm willing to let you buy into this arbitrage situation if you're willing to subsidize the other side of raising children. But so that's the thing is that $1,341,000. That's talking. I mean, and that's easy. A 14. And by the way, this was a cool thing on Twitter where you guys were sharing this. It was like, I wish somebody had told me at $25 a month it would have changed, my life. Yeah. That is so true. And I really appreciate you guys jumping in there and being part of this. It's, and Bo, I know you had talked about, I have the food and shelter discount.
Sure.
You were mentioning that, you were wondering if there's anything else.
I was trying to figure out if I could get on that train, but I didn't realize I'd have to start feeding her and putting a roof over her head. But I do think it's important to note, you don't have to have, if you're someone who's not 14 and you're listening to the show, you don't have to have a mom or dad that does this, because odds are if you have a retirement plan at work, you have this very same option. If you're not taking full advantage of the employer match, you're literally walking away from free money. Just like if you don't subscribe on YouTube, you're literally walking away from the potential to earn $1,000 for free. Just thought I'd drop that in there.
I like how you worked that in.